Linda, for my viewers, can you geographically tell us where we're located here in the state of New York?
We're about halfway between Albany, which is the capital, and New York City. According to Frederic Church, about an hour south of Albany is the center of the world, and he owned it.
I see. Let's talk a little bit now. We have quite an acreage here, and we have a home which is called a castle. Let us talk first of all about Mr. Church. What did he do? What type of artist was he?
Frederic Church was probably one of the best known of the Hudson River School artists. It was the first truly American school of art that influenced art not only here in the United States but in Europe. Up until that time, most of the art had been influenced by some aspect of Europe or Asia. And the Hudson River School came about with Thomas Cole. Church studied with Cole for a couple of years and then went out on his own. Actually, at the tender age of 17, he exhibited his first works in New York. He became very, very famous, but there are also other artists, Sanford Gifford, Kensett, Cole I mentioned before, Durand was another of the Hudson River School artists. It's really a very extensive group. But Church became well known because he was, as they called it, the artist grand. His paintings were almost murals. They were 10 by 12 feet. Huge things that actually made you feel like you were looking out into the landscape. And then on top of that, he sought out very challenging subjects, the jungles of South America, Central America, the islands, up along the coast of Labrador and Newfoundland. He also painted along the Hudson River, and he was in New York State. He did the Natural Bridge down in Virginia. So he covered the country, the U.S., as well as exotic locales. But one of the mistakes that people make when they say Hudson River School, they seem to feel that they are limited to just the Hudson Valley, when all of those artists, Cole included, ranged over the countryside and really extolled the grand American landscape.
Mm-hmm. Did Mr. Church decide, because of the large paintings, he wanted everybody to see the perspective in the painting? Is that why they were large?
No, that was just the canvas that he chose to use, and probably because the scenery that he was depicting required it. You can't capture a volcano effectively. Yes, in a sketch you can do something like this, but when you really want to give the full effect and how it dominated the landscape, you needed something big to represent the big scenery or the big subject that you were dealing with.
Where do they put a painting of that size? I'm wondering, in my house, do I have a wall for that? No, did he think of that, or wasn't that not really necessary?
Well, in your house and my house, we probably wouldn't, or we would have one wall for that painting. But the homes in the 19th century were much larger for the most part, even with your middle class. You had 10, 12, 14 rooms. You had, even with middle class, you still had servants. You had people who would assist you. And so, the wealthier actually had galleries and gallery spaces where these things would be hung and people would be invited in.
So these homes would also have the 12 and 14 and 16-foot ceilings.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
So you do have the expanse.
Yes, and these paintings fit very nicely. And for the most part, he was painting for people who had commissioned these works, and they were the wealthier people who patronized the arts, patronized the museums, and that's why these paintings could be done in that fashion. And Church not only did his own art, but for most cases, he designed his own frames as well, so that the frames were, as he felt, appropriate for the subject matter.
Was Dad into being an artist, his father, or did he not follow in his father's footsteps?
He didn't follow in his father's footsteps. His father was involved in banking, sat on the founding board of Aetna Insurance, was very much involved in financial matters in the world of finance. Church at an early age showed more of an interest in the arts, and once that was established, his father supported him with training. He studied with an artist by the name of Coe in Hartford, and then later on through the auspices of Daniel Wadsworth, who was the founder of the Wadsworth Athenaeum in Hartford. Arrangements were made for him to come and study with Thomas Cole. And he studied with Cole for a couple of years. We feel very strongly that Church's ability to manage his money and manage his affairs so very well came from the background that he had from father and the world of finance. Because Church invested his money well, and his wealth earned from his paintings actually took care of Church and his family, but also Lewis and his family. And that took them through several great crashes in the 19th century, the crash in the 20s, and still Lewis and Sally lived well, were able to maintain Olana, and Sally, for the last 10 years of her life, living here alone, she had private duty nurses as well as a full house staff. And in the 1960s, 50s, and 60s, that's still quite a statement.
For sure it is. Let's talk about the house, although I might call it a mansion, a house, but you call it a castle. Or did Church call it a castle?
Church referred to it in a couple of letters as his castle, but overall we say that it's a Persian-style villa. Church called it his home in the Persian style. Mm-hmm. And he also noted that since no one knew what the Persian style was here in the United States, he had to create this out of his head. So it's his own design. It really reflects the artist and his family's interests. As you go through the house, you're going to see that there are collections from all over the world. Some of them are wonderful treasures. Some of them are just things that tourists picked up in the 19th century. But in putting them together, it creates this whole wonderful entity that he called Olana. And we believe that the name Olana actually came from one of Strabo's volumes. Strabo was a map maker and historian. I believe it's the 4th century. I may be wrong on that, but he was a very early historian, and his maps and information was being reprinted in the late 19th century, and Mrs. Church gave Frederic a set of these reprints for Christmas in 1880, and in there is a city, Olane, O-L-A-N-E, that sits high on a hill overlooking a fertile, beautiful river valley. And shortly after receipt of this Christmas gift in 1880, we start to see Church refer to this as Olana.
Olana. Mm-hmm.
And so we feel that that's where the name came from, that this house sits high on a hill overlooking the gorgeous Hudson Valley. And Church drew that analogy. And so that's where Olana came from, and Olana is the house and 250 landscape acres. The last probably 20 years of Church's life, he spent as much time developing the landscape around this house as he did in working on a canvas. In fact, one of his letters says, "I can do more with shovel and hoe than I can with paint and brush on a canvas." So when you came on the property, you actually came into Church's last and greatest three-dimensional work of art.
Mm-hmm. The villa has how many rooms?
Oh dear, I was afraid you were going to ask. It's 60 plus.
60 rooms?
Yes. Well, we have the basement level, which was mainly servants, mm-hmm. and then the main floor, which is a combination of servants and public rooms, and then we have the service level, which is just above us. And then there's another kind of step up, a second and a half story where the family was. Then there's the nursery level, the attic level, and then the tower levels.
I see. Okay, then we are on all different levels then.
Yes.
You didn't mention any bathrooms.
There were bathrooms.
Were there bathrooms?
Yes. The churches had running water. The servants did not. The servants relied on the old bowl and pitcher and chamber pot, but there were bathrooms for the family in churches. Off of Church's studio, there's a bathroom. Just on the other side of this wall, in a corridor that used to serve an outside porch, there is a bathroom and closet area so that visitors coming in from outside exercise could freshen up. And then up on the second floor there is a master bath as well. Water was pumped up the hill from the lake to a water tower that was in about the same area as the modern tower is that we use today. And then also through the box gutters into a large copper tank that was situated under. There are three towers, the main tower and what we call the water tower and the studio tower. And so we also had rainwater that was collected. And there were times, we have letters from visitors where they complained that they didn't quite have enough hot water, or there wasn't enough water for baths that evening.
Excuse me.
But those things happened. But they did have the benefit of running water, hot and cold, and the facilities that we would know today.
Well, coming up here, and of course there's a one-way in, one-way out, what interested me the most was the fact that I knew it had to be a lot of acreage because there were a lot of people working on the landscape. So you evidently have quite a few people working on landscaping.
Yes. Well, we have the original 250 acres that Frederic Church had that made up Olana, and then we also have some buffer around the property today to protect it and to provide green space. The more the Hudson River Valley corridor is developed, the more important this green space becomes. Because as you came on the property, I'm sure you also noticed, it kind of takes you back a little bit. It relaxes you. All of a sudden you feel like you're in a different location. And it just, for all of us who work here, we feel that it's just kind of a tonic that they could... we could pay them, but we won't tell them that.
Well, because you are on a mountain, so it's very difficult that nobody's going to build next to you here. Are they?
Yes.
Really? They could?
They could very easily, even though we're up on a hilltop. If you go down to Westchester County or down in there are similar houses that are built on hilltops, but all around them there is development.
I see.
So instead of looking out and seeing trees and lakes and river, you look out and see rooftops, and it's even changed around here. I had the benefit of growing up in the area, so I know the area well. 20 years ago, you would look out and you would have seen farms, and in the spring you would have seen a carpet of apple blossoms and cherry blossoms and pear blossoms all around here. And now when you look out, there are more houses. The farms, the trees are gone, and you might have some open space here or there, but it's a totally different feel and a different look than what Church would have known, what I knew growing up, and it will change again. So these 400 acres that we hold will be very, very important.
If someone would like to get more information on this beautiful piece of property and on Mr. Church himself, how do they get that?
Well, we have the option. You can go to our website, and we have two of them because Olana is owned and operated by the state of New York. We're part of New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, that historic preservation being a very important part of it. And www.nysparks.com is the state website, or www.olana.org is the website of our Friends group. And it's very nice to have a friends group. They raise funds toward restorations and towards work that we wouldn't otherwise be able to get done. But between the two websites, they'll give you all of our hours, they'll give you directions to get here, and on our friends' website there is also information about special exhibits, special programs. We have a lot of children's programs and family programming going on, and we have the house tours, we have gallery tours. But the nice thing about it is we also have 5.5 miles of carriage road that is still extant, that you can just come and enjoy walking and enjoy the same views that Mr. Church did 100 years ago.